Okay, and now we're ready to get underway. At this point, let's start with the things we'd started on last week. Our goblin grinder needs, it's got at least one suspended trap here that never got built because it got deactivated during construction. I don't think we have sufficient weapons to build the rest of this out yet, so we're going to have to steadily increase as we go. Yeah, I could do it with our bronze discs, but we've kind of been trading those away. So the question is whether I want to sacrifice some of those to this, and I don't see any reason why this particular spot can't have some. Now, what you're gonna see here is the goblin grinder is designed to either kill them directly or knock them off into the pit, and I'm eventually going to extend this pit downward from this spot all the way down to this level here, and then we'll throw some spikes up at the bottom, just plain upright spike traps. We won't link them to a lever. We won't do anything fancy with them. They'll just be spikes in place. Because what will happen is goblins who dodge will dodge out into empty space. There's nowhere for them to land, and so they will dodge out into the empty space, and they will fall down several levels, probably breaking bones in the process, and then land on the spikes for added fun. This type of dodge me trap combined with weapon traps, combined with an archer's pillbox, is an incredibly tight kill box, basically. Once stuff gets into this area, it becomes relatively straightforward to deal with it. The only things that would survive the weapon traps alone are things that avoid traps, trap avoids, so like kobolds, for example, which would get trapped on the middle. I think they still activate pressure plates. But even if they don't, they're going to have the archers firing at them from above, and if they dodge the bolts, they fall in the pit the same as everything else. We didn't cover kobolds too much the first couple of episodes. You know, I got the dogs out there at the front end to deal with most of that. But one of the things you need to be aware of is, in addition to being trap avoid, kobolds can actually pick the locks on your doors and just walk through them like they don't exist. So you can't lock kobolds out. Goblins can be locked out temporarily until they bash the doors down, you know, to kind of gain yourself some time. But kobolds can effectively compromise your doors and just walk through them completely. So not only can they avoid traps, but they can actually just lockpick. So before we open this up to the surface, for example, if I were to do it right now, there's no defenses really between my artifact vault, which is just one floor down from the entrance, and the entrance itself. So theoretically, if a kobold got in and snuck past all my dwarves, it could sneak into the artifact vault, liberate my artifacts, and escape from the map, which would probably result in a dwarf going berserk on the spot. We're going to finish up this pillbox, get the levers linked up, get this working. I'm going to set up a burrow inside the archery area, and we'll have the archers set up to defend that when they're on duty, when we call for a red alert. We'll set up an ammo stockpile in that little 5x5 room there, and I'll have them patrol when they're not training out into this area and back to there, so they can pick up ammunition, patrol out onto the ledge, and shoot things, and then patrol back inside to get more ammo. Okay, we need to get our stuff linked up and get that resealed, and we need to get our checkpoint started. That's the next thing on our list here. Okay, now the goal behind this corridor, we can station dogs on the inside of all of these little narrow choke points on... at the moment, yeah, they can, but the Goblin Grinder isn't actually active yet. We're still getting it built. It's not even connected to the surface at this point, so there's nothing going to walk into it at all. Before we're done, when we deepen the pits, that'll handle the ramps. Even if we left the ramps around the edges, it wouldn't hurt anything. There would be nowhere to access from the ramps. In fact, we're actually going to provide a staircase that goes down into the bottom of the pit, for example, and goes all the way to the bottom so that you can walk back up. But the only spot it will actually let them access from the inside of the grinder is the grinder itself. So once they fall in, the only place they can walk back out is back into the traps, for example. The question was being asked, well, what about the ramps? If you look at my current Goblin Grinder here, there's all those areas right there are basically one level deep, and there's ramps around them. So, a Goblin could just walk in here, and then he'd walk straight across because it's the shortest route to the fortress. So he literally would walk down into the pit and walk across here, all the way to this side, walk up and go across, and never go through this. Well, that's true. There's two ways to force him, and the first, easiest way, obviously, is just to get rid of all the ramps. The second way, of course, is to dig this pit out further, so it actually has the fall involved. No, we haven't finished the Goblin Grinder, and based on the amount of digging we will have to do before to get it done, I'd estimate that we probably won't actually finish it, but it'll be ready for use once we get the first level excavated. At which point we can deal with it appropriately. What we're building here on this bottom floor is an access to the caverns. I know there's a forgotten beast down there. The question is going to be, how do we deal with him? What can we do to keep him out before we're ready to deal with him? And the answer is, well, we're going to use some traps and some bridges and similar constructs to deal with him. We'll throw up some cages here, and I'm going to build a bridge to seal off the doors with. Now up in our lever complex, I'll build the little niches that will hold the levers for those bridges as well, and that way we've got all of our bridges just off the dining room where there's plenty of, random idle dwarves just sitting around waiting for something to do, and we can have them pull the lever at a moment's notice. That way we're never waiting on the lever to actually get pulled. Gotta go ahead and pasture the last batch of animals. I don't think we did. And we also need to put a door on the turkey cage so that once the turkeys all spawn from this next wave, they don't take over the fortress. Because there are going to be a complete load of them this time. My guess is that one or more of the things that we need there they can't actually get to solely because they're trying to stand on a bridge or something. We'll have to figure it out here. Once this is all built and the traps are in place, we can, and filled with their cages and all that is set up and ready, we can send a miner down to dig out the hole and then station our military in the barracks. They should be there pretty much by default. You can see they're already down here training. That way if the Forgotten Beast comes in and he's trap avoid, which can happen, then he'll pass through the traps, for example, but he'll run smack into a military group waiting on him, basically ready to go. And if he's not trap avoid, well, then he's going to have a fun time with our cage traps. He's going to become the first inhabitant of our new zoo. You can see we've got the glass for our windows ready. We've got a fair number of rock pots built up in storage. That's good. Plenty of drinks, plenty of prepared meals. So we're not going to run out of food, for example, for our dwarves pretty much forever at this point. See, this is what happens when somebody decides to take the... I didn't cover this. I should probably do so. Remember, when I built this originally, I built it with a ramp because we just channeled it out. One good suggestion that you don't have to take, but I would, is to remove the ramp on the lower floor. Sometimes the dwarves will take it upon themselves to path through the area of the garbage chute from the top down to the ramp to the bottom, and then they'll get hit in the head by the next dwarf that's dropping something on top of them. That can cause minor injuries. Potentially, if what they are dropping is heavy and hits the head and the dwarf isn't particularly well armored, well, then you get to have some fun. It's looking like our dining room is properly engraved now. You can see that here in the rooms list, it's now marked as a royal dining room. Still have a fair amount of bone built up, so we're in good shape there. You notice now that I've reclaimed that, a dwarf comes along with a bin, scoops up all the crossbow bolts just laying around on the floor in the bolt collection area. The reason we've got these trenches dug next to the archery targets is so that bolts that miss and hit the trenches will fall down below and not break, thereby allowing them to be collected for reuse. That cuts down on the bolts you lose during training. Unfortunately, training does consume a lot of bolts. There's not a whole lot of way around it.
Did you see what I did with this thing?
Some of our smashers are becoming attached to their iron hammers at this point. Flashing items are either overlaid, so there's two items in the space and it's rotating between them, or if it's a dwarf, it may signify that that dwarf has legendary skill. Due for another good siege here before much longer. Got to re-enable our engraver. Now that the engravings in the dining room are all done, at this point I want to get the other engraver training on smoothing again, hopefully to get them both up to legendary so I can have a pair of engravers doing work. At this point you'll notice that our metalsmiths have pretty much started to train themselves up across the board. None of them are particularly skilled except in the things where they've had a mood, but frankly I can mass produce, metal items over and over again until they crank their way up. So, initially quality isn't as important as just getting the jobs done. For the caverns, well, we don't have a supply of silk yet other than what I've purchased from caravans. So our real plan is to punch a hole in the caverns, deal with anything that comes rushing in at us, and then once we've done that, I believe I saw some silk down. See, here's a little bit of silk there, the little spider web looking things here in the middle. There's some silk scattered in the area, and we'll trigger some collect web jobs and let our dwarves kind of roam around down there and pick up some of that silk. Chances are good that we're going to have some hostiles coming in from the caves initially because we've left them sealed up for this long, so my guess is there's a good supply of things that we're going to have to want to deal with. Additionally, along the way, we really haven't covered it. I started building bedrooms and I haven't finished yet. So while the dwarves are getting all that stuff linked up, let's get started on that. Creatures will spawn randomly. They'll wander in off the map edges. There is no cleaning out of the caverns. You can never guarantee that the caverns are safe. However, you could, and many people have done this, you can create a squad of masons, for example, and send them in and effectively wall up a section of the caverns to be inside your fortress. This is kind of what we're going to do. I'm going to deal with the initial rush of critters, station my military down there, and then send in a vast flood of masons to wall up a chunk of the caverns for our use. We will randomly be able to collect silk in that area, at which point we'll have access to a silk, effectively a minor variety of silk farm. That'll get us some supplies that we currently don't have, an internal supply for. But in reality, other than the vast array of wood that's here, in the form of mushroom trees and the silk, there's really nothing in the caverns that we actually need. So this is where we're starting to up our level of risk a little bit in exchange for potential resources that, we could theoretically continue to get from caravans. I should have a fair supply of silk already. As you can see, we've got a little bit of giant cave spider silk cloth and some cave spider silk cloth, but most of our cloth is in the form of rope reed. That's pretty much the works. Notice that I did not specify silk robe, silk trousers, silk shoe. I'm saving the silk in case we need it for moods. While it's a little better quality than the plant cloth, It's not so much so that we want to use it up on just whatever. We're going to make sure it gets used for only those things where it's most vital. Hyenas are not able for war training, so that guy's a butchering. Our jaguar still needs a mate. Hopefully we'll get another one from the elves. And then we'll have a mated set of jaguars, and we can have war jaguars. Won't that be awesome? Now that I'm not using the danger room, let's switch it off. We have a high level... We don't have a level 11 weaponsmith. We have a level 11 engraver. Or we did have, now he's level 20. We didn't actually make our weaponsmith into a... it's this guy is who you're thinking of. I made him into a captain of the guard, which is ostensibly a military position, but in my fortress it's primarily just a means to access the justice system if I'm going to use it. He won't actually serve on the front lines. We're not going to use him as a military dwarf. I may give him equipment. If there was, then he got burned up or something along the way. I have a level 11 metal crafter and a high level armorer, but no level 11. Oh, there's a level 11 weaponsmith here. Yeah, this guy? Is this the one you're talking about? Yeah, I didn't catch it. This guy would normally, I wouldn't assign him to the military squad. He's got a high skill in weaponsmithing. Our farmer is still doing weaponsmithing on his off hours, apparently, because his skills continue to go up. If you're looking for, best results, this guy probably should not be in the military. He's only in the military because I didn't catch it, apparently. I put him in the military temporarily to use up his bolts and then never pulled him out. At this point... he's actually a fairly reasonably skilled military dwarf. Whether we leave him or not is, arguable. He's better at weaponsmithing than my current dwarves, but frankly, we've already equipped everybody with a base level of weaponry. So until we start making steel, which I guess I could start on, but I haven't, we're probably not going to start exchanging our weapons yet anyway, unless somebody just happens to, have a lucky mood or whatever. Of course, now that you bring it up, I need to make sure there's nobody who has any other useful skills that I've kind of left out here in Limbo Land. I don't care about waxworking. I really don't care about wood crafting. Need to get everybody doing rock blocks, get their masonry skill up for those people who are masons. Oh, this is a good time to talk about hotkeys. I keep paging through this fortress, and I probably should have covered this by now. If I hit F1, I've bound this hotkey to our gate, because, well, the gate's a nice thing to be able to call up on demand. If you pull up the hotkey menu, the way this works is you pick out a hotkey, so for example, F2. And you figure out where you want it to show up. So I want F2 to be my butchering area, so I can keep track of all the meat and garbage that's produced in case I have an issue. So hypothetically I say Z for zoom here, and I name it something like butcher. Now if I hit F1, now if I leave the hotkey menu and hit F1, I go to the gate. If I hit F2, I go back to the butcher's shop, and I can effectively name as many of those as I like. For clearing the stone out in a big dig area, yeah, you use wheelbarrows and a stone stockpile. There really isn't a good way to do it. You could theoretically build minecart tracks if you're excavating multiple levels, for example, and effectively drop the stone down a hole occasionally and then pick it up from the hole and drop it in a minecart and push it somewhere useful and then use it. But generally speaking, I find it's better to just, use a bunch of haulers en masse than to deal with that. Dig circle doesn't warp me around for two reasons. First off, I never set the zoom. I only set the name, so you'll notice the zoom is actually dark. If I did, then it would actually cause a problem because it would trigger dig circle or dig V and then also zoom me to wherever I put it, which would mean that I would have to constantly be going back to where I was trying to dig. Generally speaking, if you're going to use it to trigger a Dwarf DF hack command, you don't want to set the zoom. You want to leave it as just the command itself. So, for example, if I hit Shift F8, nothing will happen because I haven't used Dig Circle yet this time around, but Shift F8 won't actually zoom me anywhere. Whereas F1 still will, even with the dig out, or even with the dig menu out. You could use this if you're constructing, something, or if there's a particular spot you want to see. When we finish our underground entrance, for example, this is going to become my gate zoom so that I can keep an eye on the grinder and enemies who are trying to get in. Still need to expand our food stockpile. I need to remember to do that, or we're going to start flooding our farm to back up. And we need to cover the concept of milling, and this will be the area where I'll do that. Milling, we're going to employ a method by which dwarves break the laws of thermodynamics. We're going to create infinite power through a perpetual motion machine known as a dwarven water reactor. Milling can be done in two ways. The first requires no power at all. You simply build a quern, set it for milling, away you go. That's the easiest way. Any fortress that can get a couple of stones together can do querns. This is a little more complex and involves some engineering on your part as a player. So this is kind of one of those things I kind of want to introduce. And the first thing we're going to have to do is actually build a water intake for our milling area. Okay, now these little odd rooms I'm building over here on the left are where our water reactors are going to be built. I know I'm kind of sidetracking from our goal here. I guess I should probably get somebody working on that so we can be doing multiple things at once. So, before I get started too much into that, let's start talking about the pillboxes and getting that done. Someone will be along here in just a brief moment to get us a nice lever built, and once that's done, I'll get the lever linking started for the pillbox, and then we'll go back to where we were. Okay then, milling. Uh, Water reactors effectively pump water in a finite controlled area. So we're going to have some water wheels that will build over these three long channels here, and we'll have a pump that pumps water here, and the water will flow out to either side, and it will flow back underneath the water wheels, which will turn the water wheels, and the water wheels will supply enough power to keep the pump running. So the pump will constantly be pumping water out of this square and into this square, where it can flood back underneath the water wheels and power the whole device. We will then draw power off of these structures here with a gear mechanism, which we will use to transfer the power out of these little chambers and away from this and back into this main chamber where we'll actually set up the milling area. You can do this vertically. I could go up, for example, from our last one here and go up into this level and then come back down from above. How you link your gear mechanics up. Once we've fired it up, the milling area will run indefinitely, with one exception. Eventually the water will evaporate, a long enough timeline. We're going to have enough water in the system that it won't be an issue for us, but you do need to be aware that occasionally you will need to deal with refilling your milling water reactors. Now, one thing I do recommend is that you have a way to do so automatically with the flip of a lever. So we're going to have two levers in our milling area, and one is going to allow water in from our water source to fill up the milling trenches effectively, and the other lever is going to be a shutdown lever, which will prevent our pumps from getting any water. And with no water coming out of the pumps, the water wheels will eventually shut down because they're not having any water flow underneath them. So we're going to have a fill and a shut-off lever for our system. That way we can close it down if we need to drain it out. We can shut down. We can refill it with the flip of a switch without having to have dwarves carry buckets back and forth, for example. That's one of the things that I really, don't like to have to deal with. Sorry, I'm looking at this for a minute, trying to figure out the best way I want to do this. And the best way we're going to probably find is to use a pair of floodgates here and here to fill the chambers for our milling area here. Once we've got a fill in place, we'll be able to make this nice and pretty. We'll be able to fill all three from just two floodgates because this area here will seal off. So what will happen is water will flow in from our source on the left, flood in. We'll close these floodgates and seal them back up so that they have the standard V shape of a standard dwarven water reactor. And then we'll link this up to our channel here and effectively get us a nice, solid, constant flow here. Okay, that'll get us a sizable flow right up to the edge of where we're doing this. Now, one thing I do need to be aware of, and for those of you following along at home, you've caught it. I built in automatically pressure reducers here. The water can't actually flow into the channels for the water reactors without passing through a pressure reducer. Yeah, the staircase hallways here are solely to prevent trees from growing and potentially blocking our halls. You can get around that by using 3 wide like this, because the trees don't grow closely enough together to cause you an issue if you do that. But I'm using them primarily for flow, and so I want to be able to sustain the amount of water I'm pushing through the system effectively at all times. We're going to have a massive flow. 3 wide water basically is going to come flooding in. It's going to flood all the way down here to this hallway, and it'll be 1 wide right at the end, but that 1 wide will be refilled constantly from a 3 below it at all times, and so the water's going to just absolutely murder this area here. If it wasn't for the pressure reducer, this would be a fantastic way to flood a fortress. Technically, I goofed because I didn't want an upstairs and downstairs right here. This was supposed to be an upstairs, but oh well. Won't hurt anything. It just means we've got additional channels for the water to get in through. We'll have to build a couple extra grates. Trees cannot grow in 7 of 7 of water, but remember, the moment I open the floodgates, to say that, for example, this system has filled up completely and now I have floodgates sealing it off, and for whatever reason, the water in my reactors has evaporated. There will be spots in your reactors that fall to 1 of 7 at times, and when they fall to 1 of 7, they can potentially evaporate that moment. So you will lose water from your reactors over time. You will need a way to refill them. If I then open the floodgates, say here, and let water from the system into this, I'm lowering this area below 7 of 7. And remember, all it takes is for a tree to have reached the end stage of being a sapling, the last point of being a sapling. It will hang there forever until the water level falls low enough, and then wham, you've got a tree. And so basically you can have trees waiting to strike in your water sources effectively. Notice that this actually bisects an iron vein for bonus points. So, let's make sure our dwarves clean that out immediately. We'll tell them to dump it in the refuse pile and reclaim it later. Trees will grow, for example, you can see here in my pasture spaces, I've got trees here. There's mushroom trees that have sprouted up in these areas. There's one here, one here, one here, and there's another one here, and they're all over through here. Trees will sprout anywhere there's been mud or where you have soil. So, for example, you're not going to find any trees growing on my bare stone, but when we dug this out originally, remember we flooded it, and we flooded some of the extra water into this area here. You'll notice the mud, and we've started to get plants. At some point, it's possible we could get trees growing in this little tiny section here. They won't grow where they can block the door because I've got a cage built there. They won't grow on the door, they won't grow on the cage, so we're safe. We won't have a access restriction into this room. But theoretically, depending on how your fortress is set up and where your trees sprout up, they can block a 1 wide hallway, and your dwarves will start canceling jobs and you won't have any idea why. Now, dumping this iron is not really the best way to get rid of it. The best way, of course, would be to have plenty of haulers who have nothing better to do except haul iron all day long, but it's the quickest way to make sure that my dwarves immediately begin removing it from the area that I'm eventually going to flood. I don't want to have it here much longer. I want to get this stuff forbidden and get on with other tasks that we want to get to tonight.
I'm gonna hang on to this.
So while our dwarves are cleaning out the channel, let's talk about gems. I think last time, let me double check, I think we started cutting some gems. We didn't actually encrust anything, as I recall. We have 83 cut gems, so I'm guessing we either cut them or we imported them at some point. That's okay. Either way will work. We've got a large quantity of shorls here. Let's use those. We set up stockpiles here that would take from, that would only hold our finished goods, musical instruments in this case, and deliver to these jewelers' workshops. So if I now add an encrust with shorls job on repeat, and I tell it to encrust finished goods, and I put it on repeat, it will come along and say, oh, I need a finished good, and it'll pick up any musical instruments from that stockpile and immediately start encrusting it. Using the give to workshop command, you can control exactly what your workshops do in terms of what gems on what items down to the nth degree. If you want to only put gems on masterwork musical instruments carved from obsidian, you can do that. If you want to make sure that you're only using rubies on obsidian musical instruments, perfectly doable. If you want to make sure that, you know, you're encrusting it with this gem and then studding it with that metal, but you're only doing it on masterwork gold tables for your dining room, if you want to get that obsessive about it, Dwarf Fortress will let you do it. Be forewarned. If you link a stockpile to a workshop, as I have with these, that workshop can only take supplies from the stockpiles it's linked to, which means you must have all of the necessary ingredients in the stockpiles that are linked. All of the ingredients. So, if I wanted to have a brewing stockpile pull from a particular stockpile, I could say link a plant stockpile to that still, but if I don't also link a supply of barrels or pots to that same still, that still will never produce a single bottle of booze, ever, because it can't figure out where to get the barrels from. So if you start down this road, you have to go all the way. You have to make sure that you have the entire logistics chain for whatever job you're getting ready to undertake linked up. Otherwise, nothing. You get squat. So be careful. This is powerful, but it can be fragile. I only link stuff like this when I'm wanting to either demonstrate the concept or I have a particular type of item I want to make sure is the only type of item I'm encrusting, for example. Doing this with, you know, major industries can cause issues where nothing is getting done because your stockpiles are not linked properly. Once you set it up, at that point the only overhead is in maintenance. So for example, if I want to switch from musical instruments to tables, I have to change the stockpile, but as long as I do that, there's nothing that stops you from doing it. You basically change the job from finished goods to furniture, change the stockpile so it's appropriately linked, set the stockpile to take from its new supply, and you're off and running. These encrusted items show up a little differently. You'll notice, see here, this is a drum that hasn't been, this is a basic masterwork drum. This is a masterwork drum that's encrusted with some type of gem. So see these little double brackets? That's letting me know that there's an add-on, basically, that this has been encrusted. And if I go down here and I actually view this item, and I look at its description with V, you're going to see that this is a rhyolite drum, and on the image is a slab and shoral by this other guy. So this is the guy who built the drum, and then this is the guy who decorated it, effectively. The value of this at 140 should be, I believe, higher than this base basalt version here, which is only 120. Effectively, I'm getting the benefit from the shorals, which may or may not be particularly valuable. They're probably not, given the number we have, and given that our gem cutters are low skill. But once you get high-quality items encrusted with high-quality cut gems, you know, and so on and so forth, those adds can really stack up. You can have something that's studded and encrusted and, you know, adorned with hanging rings and all those other things you see in an artifact, if you put it through enough layers of refinement, effectively. Okay, so we've got let's get our grates built. Let's make sure our ore is all out of the area here. Make sure we've got everything out of there we need to. Yes, looks like we did. We need to dump or move these stones that are in the way, because if I forbid them, they aren't going to get moved. Once those are done, we can start putting the grates up on on those two squares. When you're milling, you have to mill into bags, and I covered cloth briefly for making shoes, robes, and trousers to keep your dwarves closed so they don't go berserk. But the same industry also supplies bags through cloth bags. You can get bags from leather, you can get bags from silk, but plant cloth is incredibly abundant in my fortress. That's going to be what we're going to rely on. With our grates in place, we are now ready to link this up. The only thing we need at this point is a means to control flow, and that's going to be through floodgate, which our masons haven't finished building yet. I'm going to turn off wheelbarrows on the stone stockpile for a moment. This will allow any folks who are hauling stone who are idle and have stone hauling to haul stone, regardless of whether they are. You're not limited by the number of wheelbarrows anymore, effectively. So I could have 20 haulers, for example, doing the hauling. Doesn't look like I have enough haulers set on stone hauling for this to be of use. Theoretically, this allows you to basically haul stone en masse, and so while three guys with wheelbarrows are faster than 3 guys without wheelbarrows, 40 guys all hauling stone at once probably ends up being quicker in the long run, just by virtue of how many. We've got a few extra by doing this, but not enough probably to make up the difference. We just don't have that many idle haulers sitting around waiting. Notice that while the floodgate is built, it's still being moved, so we can't actually build it just yet. Somebody's got it under wraps while they're moving it off to a stockpile somewhere. Trog, I'm on Eastern Time in the United States, so this is going to be way late for you on my stream here, because I'll typically run till midnight, and that's like 5 a.m. your time. If you've got questions, the best way to contact me would be through Reddit. I generally don't answer YouTube comments, and I don't really visit Twitch unless I'm actually streaming. So feel free to drop me a note on Reddit if you have questions about how to set something up or if something wasn't clear in the videos, and I'm more than happy to answer. Ooh, and we're going to get a nice red floodgate for both of these. That'll be nice. It'll be nice and color coordinated. I think I got to get the up-down staircases built to the extent I'm going to do them first. So once this staircase is in place all the way down, then I can remove the ramps and start down further into the fortress. But I need something to hold up that level above us here. So before I actually start cutting out the supports, I believe it is the case that we should be okay once we get that staircase there built. That should get us our necessary support structure to remove the ramps. Got to link the pressure plates to the hatches on their respective sides. So the left pressure plate is linked to both of the left hatches, and the right pressure plate is linked to both of the right-hand hatches. Okay, with our staircase built, now we are ready to start excavation. This should provide the necessary support. And our pillbox shields are ready to go for testing. Notice we immediately have somebody move in and flip the lever. That's why I build right off of the dining room. And our shields should all flip up. Bang! At that point, archers don't get killed. We rebuild the wall so it's nice and solid, and that way nothing comes in around the edges of our pillbox. Dwarves are busy digging out our staircase, which will provide support all the way down for our upper level. And then we get to find out if I remember how... cave-ins work or not, because if I'm wrong, this is going to cave in really, really dramatically. We're going to lose all our weapon traps. We're going to lose the hatches. We're probably going to lose every miner in the fort. We're going to have to rebuild picks. We're going to have to restart training miners. So here's your chance for, did I remember how that works or not? Anybody taking bets? Come on, guys. Anybody want to bet on it? I'm not sure, actually, if I remember how to do this or not.
No, I can't do it. When I'm holding this, I feel unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, the worst that could happen is I totally fuck it up, right? As soon as we get this pressure plate linked up, we'll dig out the pit. Losing 10 miners in a fortress of 100, losing 10% of my population, effectively, would be quite a drop.
No. I can't do it.
I hate this bug. Notice that it teleported the item to the left here. What happens is the dwarf will move into this spot and he'll stand on the same construction he's trying to build. And usually they will get off of it, but not always. This did not happen in older versions. It does happen in the current version, so you have to watch. You'll go to build a wall and Urist McStupid will stand on the wall he's trying to build and then go, gee, I can't build the wall, there's something in the way. Once he does that with a particular ingredient, a particular item, for this particular bug, that item is effectively contaminated and you can't use it for building that wall ever. He'll keep suspending it over and over again, no matter how many times, no matter, you know, even if you try to get somebody else to do it effectively, it's still going to keep doing it. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping against hope that Toady squashes that in the next version, but I'm doubting it. Yeah, the problem is that you'll build, 30 or 40 walls correctly, and one of them will be bugged. And so your dwarf will stand on that one wall in the middle of nowhere, cancel it, and then go on with his job. And if you're not paying attention, you still have a hole in your wall at that point that you have to deal with. Okay, at this point, I think we've got everything we need here. Let's get our excavations started. Notice that you do not excavate more than a single layer at one time. I'm going to say that again. You do not excavate more than a single layer at one time, and it's still not enough. You do not excavate more than a single layer at one time. The reason is because if you do, you can actually have your dwarves get underneath the cave-ins and kill themselves manually. They're stupid, guys. Don't trust them. Okay, our dwarves will dig out a channel all the way around this room, except for the areas that were originally holding up our goblin grinder before we built that connecting floor between the stairs and the grinder. They'll come along and they'll channel out, so now the pit's starting to be dug here. You can see it's starting to go down. So far, so good. No cave-ins yet. Okay, that's going to take a while, so let's get our stuff linked up here. And the way this trick...
More migrants. Can't we pass a law?
Migrants. Welcome to the land of the holler, boys. Get to work. Just to double check, this guy actually has some useful skills. He's going to become a metal worker. Not much in the way of skills aside from those. I've got a couple of woodcrafters and a stone carver, but I've got a few of those. This guy here, he's useful. We're going to make him into a ceramics worker. And this guy here, he's a metal worker. But most of the rest of these folks, you know, are just kind of meh. Waxworking, for example, I haven't even got bees set up yet, you know, beekeeping. I've got a couple of people who would be suited for beekeeping, but beekeeping is such a marginal industry that I rarely set it up before my fortress is heavily matured. Well beyond the point where we are now. At this point, let's see, we need to go ahead and get everybody working on stones because I've got blocks being built. Got a fairly massive number of haulers, don't I? We're up to 47 haulers. $132 dwarves, so roughly a third of our population, give or take, is haulers at this point. So we basically have a giant hauler corps getting ready to arrive here.
I can't do it.
Join us, Shabla. Play Dwarf Fortress. Join us. I think I'm running at a 200 or 250. I rarely take it out quite that far. We may run into problems with FPS. You can see my FPS has been dropping for the last few seasons here. We may have to start taking steps to mitigate our frame rate issues as the number of dwarves continues to climb. fact, before before they get too established, let's deal with animals. Oh, look, they brought an alpaca. A couple of pets that are going to have to be reassigned to the holding pens, and then that's pretty much it. Drakes, for those of you watching at home, are ducks. Male ducks. Okay, and we're getting our milling area up and running. Our goblin grinder is being dug out. Getting our link job finished up here. Let's put those haulers to use reclaiming bolts. Generally, I have brew on repeat. At this point, you know, I've got 4,000, 5,000 drinks and 3,000 meals, something like that. I could theoretically shut them off and survive for a good long while just on what I've got built up here. This is a fairly sizable stockpile of various types of booze. I wouldn't have the issue with only having one type of booze for quite some time. If you're going to leave them on repeat, you do need to make sure that you're not swamping your stockpiles. You'll notice that our food stockpile here is about half full of pots, so we're not as full as we could be, but we're at a fairly high level of utilization for our food stockpile. And I don't think I can actually dig this out to a 31. Let's see how close we are. Oh, yeah, we can. Awesome. So we're going to expand this out to a 31 by 31 stockpile, which is the maximum size. A nice round food stockpile. That way we've got plenty of storage space for our food. That will mean, however, that we have to relink this stockpile to all those it's taking from. So, for example, you can see I've got a give in one place and like half a dozen different takes that I have to deal with. We're going to have to relink this effectively to everything. This is unprepared food. Our prepared food is elsewhere. But our food stock, this is our main food stockpile. This is where food goes before it's prepared. If this backs up, our farms don't get harvested because there's nowhere to store anything. Our meat rots in the butcher's shops. Our cheese rots in the processing area. Having your main unprepared food stockpile back up can actually cause you a massive food problem by virtue of, ruining whole crops of plants, for example. Now, the reason we pull this lever is because when we do, it will open up the lower floodgate and leave the upper floodgate ready to be built. If we have this linked properly here, it should... There we go. Once the floodgate is built, we'll link it, we'll pull the lever, that will send the floodgate back down, and then we can test that they are working appropriately, and then we're ready to start filling our channels as necessary. That one little spot with the channel on the level above. Okay, and our next floodgate's in place. Let's get it linked up. Once that's linked up, we can get those closed off and get really underway for that. Our miners have got about 2/3 of this room done, and we're going to have to go back, remember, and dig out the spots that are still flat here. Although they're no longer supporting the area above them, we want this whole thing to be a pit. We don't want goblins diving off of a ledge and landing on a lower level ledge. We want them falling all the way to the bottom.
I can't do that there.
They won't, however, dig that area up to the right, while the area on the left needs to be dug. Dwarves tend to favor objects to the left and north of their current object. So whenever possible, miners will tend to dig the left side of something first, for example. Stockpile 7 is the one we're currently linked to on all these places, and I believe it's this stockpile here, the meat stockpile, the cheese stockpile, the plant stockpiles, both of those. This planning mode is one of the useful things that I can do to set up items. Basically, what I'm doing here is the planning mode is a feature that was added with DF Hack. Someone was asking about naming stockpiles. No, not currently. There's just a number and what they contain, and sometimes it just says stockpile if they contain more than one thing, more than one type of thing. You can't name them. It'd be nice if you could. You go appeal to Toady and get him to start implementing some of the nice user features we'd love to see. My guess is you're not going to get the response you're hoping for. Our existing setup, if I'm understanding the planning mode correctly, and this is pretty much the first time I've used it, what should happen is that the dwarves will start moving items into those slots as though they were manually defined, only they're not manually defined. They're coming from whatever random item just happened to be first on the list. So the dwarves will effectively come along and slap stuff in, I think. And as before, we don't manually assign it's not built into Vanilla Dwarf Fortress. It's one of the add-ons that I have through DF Hack. If you go to the plugin for Dwarf Monitor, it also includes plugins for workflow, and one of them is the search utility, and I believe the planning utility is actually listed there as well. They're all included together. I highly recommend just going ahead and snagging the whole package. In particular, say for example I pull up my units screen, I can do a search and say I want to see only my DACA units. And so you can see down here at the bottom where it's doing a search on DACA. This plugin is from DF Hack, and so if I'm looking for a particular dwarf by name, say for example I was looking for this guy right here, Tekkud, I could search Tekk, and there's everybody named Tekkud in my fortress, and if as long as I know his last name, I could type his whole name out and get just the one I'm looking for. If you know what you want, that can actually be very useful. Yeah, the Lazy Noob Pack comes with DF Hack. You'll probably have to change out your version. This is add-on. This is somebody built this as a separate plugin for DF Hack, so you're actually not even going to DF Hack's site to get this. So if you're using the Lazy Noob Pack, I don't think it even includes the current version of DF Hack. You've got to go get the current version of DF Hack, and then additionally go and get this plugin separately. These are the kind of usability features that will absolutely revolutionize your Dwarf Fortress play. A lot of this manual hunting and pecking for particular types of items, for example, can really be minimized. I don't know if you were watching. I didn't bother with this, but the building plan, I could set building plan to only put masterwork items out, and then as long as I had a masterwork mason producing, lots of them, I could effectively have every dwarf have a masterwork cabinet, every dwarf have a masterwork chest. I could set it so only decorated items would be, so it'd have to be a masterwork gem-encrusted chest, for example, for every dwarf. Those kinds of things actually can speed up your the manual nitpicking you have to do with a fortress as you go along. The elves have arrived, so let's cross our fingers for a nice female jaguar, guys. The building plan works like this. You tell it you want to build, say, a bed. Hang on, let me turn planning off. So, oh, it's going to tell me beds have to be indoors. Okay, so let's pretend I was going to build a bed right here for whatever reason. There's no access to bed because I don't have any. I tell it, okay, P for planning mode. Bang, now I'm in planning mode. At this point, I can designate the bed wherever I want it, even though I don't have any in the fortress. I can change the quality, so this is, I want only masterful beds. I want only decorated beds. I want only materials. I want only beds made out of soap. Not that there ever would be such a thing, but I could then, then go on and create beds just normally, like you normally would. And when a masterful, decorated soap material bed became available, it would immediately build it on that spot for me automatically. So theoretically, I'm starting to get these coffers are now starting to be moved in here. We should start to see as my masons produce more of them, these rooms are going to start filling up with furniture automatically without me having to screw with them. Now, keep in mind, I'm not using real high-quality materials here. I just want first available, so I may end up with stuff that's not quite what I want. But I believe this saves you from having to hunt and pick around, because it's using chests by default. So you notice all these buildings are chests, whereas if I build the containers manually, not only do I have to pick through the list to find the ones I want, as like, for example, if I want a masterwork chest of a particular material, I don't have to mess with this anymore. And then I can just set up, well, I want all chests, as opposed to having to pick past the beds or pick past the bags to find the chests, and then pick through the list of chests to find the one that has masterwork of the particular material I want. I can basically just crank them out en masse and let my dwarves handle the sorting in the building. This is not in the standard DF hack. Oh, look, an ambush with the elves. Yay! The elves are all going to die! Not what I wanted, but I'm not going to be able to save them anyway. Oh, those poor merchants. Those poor, poor merchants. Oh, where do you think you're going? Yeah, see, the merchant items are not forbidden, so yeah, that's the first thing we're going to do now. And that should fix the problem of all of our people trying to get out to get the stuff. You'll notice our people were starting to make their way out through the traps, and yeah, we don't want that. That's bad. Where that miner thinks he's going, I have no idea. I don't think we said anything to be dug on the surface. I also don't think I'd be screwing with our miners if I was them, but, what do I know? I'm not worried. Let him fight. Miners are no longer a necessary skilled profession. You can use an unskilled miner and get the same results as a full-skilled miner, only slower. So if they trap this guy down there and he finally gets, pinned down and they obliterate him, well, idiot. Pasture grass does come back over time, both underground and above ground grass. See there, look, he fought that guy off, and now that Lasher is retreating because he just had a piece of himself severed. He lost a foot. This is why you don't fuck with a legendary miner. Yeah, having messed with the planner even just a little bit I have so far, I've got to say that's one of those things that, now that I've seen it, I'm never going to be able to play without it again.
Feast on dwarf flesh.
Oh, look, another ambush. Jesus. Okay, it's time to get everybody indoors. If it ain't critical, you ain't doing it. Aw, they killed him. Still chasing that other one, though. Rally the suckers! I mean militia! Couple of wounded dwarves who look like they're having trouble getting back to the hospital. We've got soap and a well, so we're in good shape. Splints and cloth and thread and all the other good stuff. About the only thing we don't have in place already is a traction bench, and that's one of the things we were going to discuss tonight. So let's get on that right now. Because our dwarves may actually have a chance to use the traction bench. You'll see we've got a couple of dwarves there. They're blinking X's. That means they're wounded and or unconscious. They will not be retrieved while we are dealing with intruders. Not sure what our archer there is firing at. I don't actually see anything anywhere near anywhere he could hit, but... Run, little goblin, run! This is why lashers are bad, by the way. Those whips actually penetrate armor a lot better than you might think, and our military is not particularly skilled. So we're going to end up with a few wounded out of this, and possibly some dead ones, we'll see.
got that.
At this point, everything's either caged or driven off, so we need to unburrow people and get them working on the retrieval of all these goods and services laying around this top here. Massive reclaim. Everything on the map basically is now under reclaim. Every idle hauler in the